I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, new rules could be on the way for San Diego's taxi companies. Some drivers say it could help them in the competition against ride-sharing companies like Uber. We'll take a look at the possible options for expanding the convention center now that its funding plan is dead. And we follow the money in the 52nd District congressional race. What happened to the political action committees that supported Republican Brian Bilbray last time? The answer may surprise you. Aztecs coach Steve Fisher takes the Ice Bucket Challenge, and for him, it's personal. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. A major change could be coming to San Diego's taxi industry. Drivers say it will help them compete better with ride-sharing companies like Lyft and Uber. City Councilwoman Marty Emerald is proposing opening the industry to the free market. She wants to lift the cap on the number of cab permits given out in San Diego. Emerald says her change will bring down the cost of the permits, making it cheaper to drive a cab. Drivers say that'll make it easier for them to serve customers and make a better living.
We've heard your concerns about the level of our service. We've heard your concerns about the safety of the vehicles. We've heard your concerns about the price of our meters. We are in control now. We can compete directly with these other ride-sharing companies and give you the service that you deserve.
City Attorney Jan Goldsmith says he supports the change and is prepared to defend it in court. But not all drivers agree with the plan. Some permit holders say it would put more taxis on the streets, meaning less business for them. The State Assembly is considering a bill requiring drivers for Lyft and Uber to carry a minimum level of insurance. The ride-sharing devices or services are now backing the bill after the coverage amount was dropped from $750,000 to $200,000. Companies would have to provide the coverage whenever a driver logs on to their ride-sharing app to pick up passengers. A federal judge has given preliminary approval to a settlement over Homeland Security's deportation practices. We first told you about this settlement last night. It means undocumented immigrants cannot be pressured into signing voluntary departure forms and then be sent out of the country. A hearing for final approval is set for February. What's next for the convention center expansion now that its funding plan is dead? Amitha Sharma takes a look at the possibilities.
Despite spending millions of dollars and years planning the expansion of San Diego's convention center, the idea was killed this week after the city decided against challenging a court ruling on financing the project. The decision is renewing talk of building a Charger Stadium downtown and possibly expanding the convention center in an unconventional way. Joining me are Stephen Johnson, Vice President of Public Affairs for the San Diego Convention Center, and San Diego City Councilman David Alvarez. Steve, let's start with you. Do you think the city stood a legal chance in appealing the court ruling that struck down the financing plan of the expansion through a levy on local hotels?
Well, I think the decision by the appeals court was very strong, and I think the city council made the appropriate decision.
David, so much money was put into the planning of this expansion, and yet the financing didn't have strong legal ground. How did this get past the city's legal advisors?
Well, actually, there was a vote a couple of years ago, and I was the only council member who voted against the financing scheme. We did have advice from the city attorney that said that this could be challenged and that this we were trying new ground. And so we were warned, but still, folks decided to move forward on it. Again, myself being the only exception. And the trial court was very, very clear about that this was a tax, and that in order to have a tax approved, you can't just do it by the legislative body, by the city council. You have to go to the vote of the people. And that did not happen in this case.
And why were you opposed to this expansion?
Well, I felt that the tax, the way it was created, was first unfair, and second, I actually thought it was going to be problematic constitutionally, as it ended up being. It was created in a way that taxed some hotels more than others, and it wasn't even taxing the hotels, it was taxing the guests, the visitors. And again, it's very clear that if you are going to tax people, that you have to get a public vote for that, and it has to get approved, and it wasn't done that way, and so that's why I didn't support it. But with that said, at this point where we're at is how are we going to build an expansion, a facility, a convention center facility that's going to meet the needs of us here in San Diego. And as you very well eloquently pointed out, for me, I'm interested in talking about how could we potentially discuss a joint use facility with something like a Charger Stadium, or talking about a facility somewhere else that's a little bit different than what we've been hearing for the last couple of years.
So, Stephen, I know that in the past you have not been supportive of an idea of a non-contiguous expansion. Do you think that's an idea that you might be able to get behind now?
Well, I think what we've done is just done the market research to talk to our clients and brought that information forward. And what policymakers have to do is take all the information, both the information we bring forward, but also other information, and make a policy decision. So we're doing our job just trying to advise the policymakers on what kind of a product the clients are looking for and want to buy. It becomes then a policy decision as to what they want to do in terms of building additional exhibit space.
And what kind of product do the clients want to buy? I mean, what's
Right.
the downside of a non-contiguous expansion?
Well, the downside is some of the clients that are currently outgrowing our facility are not going to come back into San Diego's rotation if they don't have space, and they need a larger space and they want it to be contiguous. So we may lose some clients, but we'll also gain clients, smaller shows, if you will, if there is a non-contiguous expansion. So there are upsides and downsides, and I think what we've tried to do is bring all those pieces of information together forward. We've advanced an expansion for contiguous that would accomplish all the real goals that we were shooting for. Where we are now is we have to revisit kind of the conversation, and as Councilmember Alvarez says, have a larger community dialogue about how we move forward.
And that community dialogue is already beginning to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
It's been going on for a very, very long time. But there was a new idea that was floated by former state legislator Steve Peace about allowing San Diego State University to rent Qualcomm Stadium, which would generate more cash for the city, and then could possibly provide financing for a stadium downtown, a new Charger Stadium downtown, as well as convention center expansion. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think it's a very interesting idea. I think the decision that was made by the council this week to sort of move on allows us to engage in this really more creative thinking. Ideas like this one, where could we look to potentially solve the solution? And as Stephen mentioned, from the Convention Center Corporation side, for business, for them to attract businesses the way they wanted to, they were looking for this contiguous space. For myself, as a policymaker, as a leader here in the region, I need to look at different things. I need to look at how do we solve the issue of growing our convention facilities so that we can be competitive. Now we can talk about the Chargers and how could we engage them in this discourse. And then there's the idea of the old Qualcomm site and how do we best utilize that site that's been so underutilized for so many years.
And we're going to end it there. Councilman Alvarez, Stephen, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
A San Diego judge is upholding a state law designed to encourage charter cities to pay prevailing wages on construction projects. SB 7 grants state funds for those projects if the cities pay prevailing wages on their public works projects. A half dozen cities had challenged the law, including El Cajon, Oceanside, Vista, and Carlsbad. An appeal of the ruling is expected. Today, the State Assembly passed a ban on plastic shopping bags. The bill failed earlier this week. SB 270 would make retailers charge 10 cents for paper bags. Opponents say that punishes customers and would cost jobs. The bill now goes to the state Senate, which has until Sunday to take action. If it becomes law, it would be the nation's first statewide ban. Environmentalists say they may sue over a Forest Service decision to allow logging in areas burned by last year's rim fire near Yosemite. They say the area has become a vital habitat for endangered animals, but the timber industry says logging will clear the area for public use. and reduce the danger of future wildfires. Oh my, huge surf along the Southern California coast. This was some of the action in Newport Beach yesterday. The wave's not as big here in San Diego County, but the Weather Service is warning about strong rip currents through tonight off the San Diego coast. The midterm election is just a few weeks away, and a San Diego congressional race is expected to be one of the most competitive in the country. It's the 52nd congressional district between Democratic incumbent Scott Peters and former Republican City Councilman Carl DeMaio. It's already attracted a lot of money, in particular, a lot of money from political action committees, or PACs. Joe Girardi from our partner iNewsSource took a look at where the money is going. He joins us from the newsroom. So which way has the PAC money been heading?
So far, PACs have contributed more than $1.2 million to DeMaio and Peters, most of it to Peters. He got about $950,000 of that money. DeMaio's got about $250,000. This is a reversal from this point in the campaign of 2 years ago when Brian Bilbray was outraising Peters nearly 9-1.
So Peters is doing a lot better among PACs this time around. What changed?
In one word, incumbency. PAC money is attracted to incumbents like moths to a flame. In a stark example of this, we took a look at how many PACs donated to Bilbray in 2012 that are supporting Peters this time around, and there are 100 of them. 100 PACs that contributed to Bilbray in 2012 are now donors to Peters' campaign. Only 46 PACs that donated to Bilbray in 2012 are contributing to this year's GOP candidate, Carl DeMaio.
But why are PACs so loyal to the incumbents?
The first thing to understand is that most PACs represent businesses or trade associations and other groups whose interests are practical, not political. They don't care who controls Congress so long as their interests are protected. Keeping that in mind, people who follow money and politics identify two big reasons that PACs give to incumbents. First, they like winners, and in 2012, 90% of House incumbents won their races. Incumbents are seen as safe bets. Second, they want influence with the people who can protect their interests right now, and that's incumbent members of Congress. As one close watcher of money and politics put it to me, giving to a challenger may pay off over time if they win, but no matter what you think of him or her, giving to the incumbent pays off right now.
And we've got all these numbers online at kpbs.org. iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi following the money. Thanks, Joe. After weeks of shying away from the media, the CEO of a small San Diego company came forward last night to discuss his firm's experimental drug to treat the Ebola virus. MAP Biopharmaceutical CEO Kevin Whaley says it's pretty satisfying to see a handful of patients who took ZMAP recover from that frequently fatal virus. But he is hesitant to say that his company's experimental drug helped them pull through.
Hopefully, ZMAP had played some role in that, but that remains to be seen.
He said only large clinical trials could prove that ZMAP works, and with new rounds of government funding, that's what his company is preparing for. But Whaley said making more ZMAP will take months. The stigma surrounding mental illness is a powerful force. Some San Diegans with mental health issues are trying to reduce it by sharing their personal stories. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg talked to some of the people involved in a unique effort to increase understanding.
This is probably when it was getting bad.
For Regina Wicker, the mood swings and crying fits began when she was in the 6th grade.
By the time I entered junior high, that's when it was very noticeable to my family and to myself that something wasn't quite right.
Wicker's mom brought her to a therapist. She was diagnosed with depression. Wicker hated being labeled.
I wanted to be normal. You know, I was a kid, so to be 13 and be told you're different And depression still didn't really make, that word didn't make sense to me.
As time went on, it became more and more difficult for Wicker to go to school. She just couldn't take it.
I just wanted to be at home. I wanted to have the blinds drawn and just sleep.
Wicker took a variety of different medications. Not one of them was a good fit. She didn't like the side effects. The depression and anxiety continued. When she was in her 20s, Wicker had a troubled marriage. After her divorce, her life continued to unravel. A few years later, she hit rock bottom.
I remember getting in my car and driving up to Oceanside and just ready to end it all.
The CDC estimates 1 out of 4 Americans has a mental health issue. What's more, mental illness is the #1 cause of disability in the United States.
If you look at me, you wouldn't know my story and how much I've suffered and that I wanted to take my life and that I've been in jail and that you would not know all those things. I'm not going to share my story tonight, but they are.
On a recent weekday evening, Michelle McDonald introduces Wicker and Deva Libson to a class of future therapists at Brandman University. The two women will share their stories of dealing with severe mental illness. They'll talk about their struggles and what helped get them into recovery. Michelle McDonald coordinates the In Our Own Voice program. It's sponsored by the National Alliance for Mental Illness. 4 times a week, program speakers visit local colleges, churches, and community groups. McDonald says she's surprised how, for many people, mental illness is an abstract concept.
My experience is when I share my story, they're like, you were what? You did what? And then what happened? And so when we put a face to it, it makes it real and makes people say, oh yeah, you know, that's my sister, that's my brother. Man, that was me.
And my whole world crashed. I became psychotic. I had a severe episode and ended up in a psychiatric hospital, one of these kind of locked wards where they lock the door and throw away the key. I mean, it was bad.
After Lipson and Wicker talk about some of their lowest moments, they tell the audience how they finally came to accept that they had a problem. Wicker says she realized it 2 years ago. That's when a doctor told her she had borderline bipolar disorder, in addition to severe depression.
I'm like, okay, that explained it. And once I was able to take that in from what the doctor said, it made it a little bit easier but I think it made the difference that I was older and I wanted that help finally, or at least I wanted to get better.
For Wicker, accepting that she had a mental illness was the first step towards recovery. It took the shame and guilt out of it.
And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to live with this forever. It's not something that, oh, I feel better, and I just go on, and I wish it was that way, but it's not.
Wicker gets a lot of emotional support from her sister, who she lives with. She also benefits from spending time with others in recovery. Therapy student Jessica Bradley says listening to the speakers helped reinforce the idea that recovery doesn't happen overnight.
It's a lifelong discovery and process, and I loved hearing that, what their journey was along those lines, and I think it was really helpful to know what helped them, and as I said before, what really kind of made a difference for them to want to just have hope and keep going in their lives.
Wicker says when she shares her story, people frequently tell her that she doesn't look like somebody who has a mental illness.
I have this big smile, and I stand tall, and so people automatically cannot believe it. So I'm hoping by being a face of not what people I think is the normal, maybe the homeless guy, they're seeing me, they'll think, oh, okay, well maybe it's, I don't want to say not as bad, but maybe it's not what I thought.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. We have a link to the In Our Own Voice program on our website, kpbs.org. A new novel explores the trauma of war and its aftermath. Amitha Sharma talks with the author.
A new memoir-based novel by Vietnam War veteran Fred Rivera of Murrieta tells a gritty story of combat, camaraderie, loss, and psychological wounds in the jungles of Southeast Asia more than 40 years ago. Rivera joins me to talk about his new book, Raw Man, which is Nam War spelled backwards.
Hi, Annie.
Thank you for coming on the program. Good. So what prompted you to write this book now, more than 4 decades after the Vietnam War?
Yes, so much time has passed since the Vietnam War that if you talk to anybody under the age of 40, they know absolutely nothing about it. And the Vietnam War is losing its legacy or its place in history. And it was such a controversial war that ignited such a peace movement in the States and a clash of culture that I wanted to make sure that younger people would have an idea of what it was like.
But you also write in the book about going through letters that you had written to your parents after your mother had died. What role did that play in
Everything.
motivating you?
My mother passed away, and when my sister and I shut the house down, we discovered that my mother had saved every letter I wrote to her. And I took them, we read them, and I took them home, and I noticed that I never told them the truth. I never told them about the danger I was in. And one letter starts off, "Hi, sorry I haven't written, but I'm in the hospital." And today's modern warfare, you have Skype, you have Facebook, you have email, you have so many ways to communicate instantaneously. We were not in contact with our loved ones.
But you talk about the dangers in those letters that you omitted, actually.
I did not want to expose.
You didn't write about that, but there was one instance in 1969 when a grenade hit the vehicle you were in, killing everyone inside, including your best friend, Herman. And you suffered, ultimately, a very severe back injury from that attack. What was the psychological toll of this war, this incident on you?
September 6, 1969, we were in an 8-hour battle. And when we took the hit from the rocket-propelled grenade, I was actually catapulted out of the driver's hatch, injuring my back. And when I lost consciousness, and when I came to, Herman I had him cradled in my arms, and he was bleeding from his carotid artery, and I could do nothing to stem the flow of blood, and he passed with me holding him.
And what kind of psychological wounds did that
everything. It devastated me. It made me realize how cheap life was, and I was angry at God that he would allow this to happen.
The Veterans Administration estimates that 10 to 20% of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans have PTSD. What advice would you share with them based on your experiences?
Well, I do a lot of outreach work, and I work with a lot of young veterans. And the first thing that I tell them is to stop self-medicating, because that is the number one symptom of PTSD. And when there is a thing called the Vet Center, which is an outreach program, and it's not really affiliated with the VA, but has access to the VA. And if a young man goes to the Vet Center, he will find help in counseling, in group, and in problems with alcohol and drugs.
And we've got to end it there. Fred Rivera, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next news hour, the latest news, analysis, and in-depth reporting you've come to expect from our team. Join us tomorrow for the PBS News Hour.
Here, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Ice Bucket Challenge coming to San Diego State Mesa today. Head basketball coach Steve Fisher and his staff got doused first and then challenged their players, the Aztec cheerleaders, and anybody else who wanted to join in. Yeah, a lot of wet, chilly folks walking around the campus today. The Ice Bucket Challenge, by the way, a fundraiser for ALS. That's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Coach Fisher's son, Mark, has ALS. He's also an Aztec basketball coach. Now, normally, the challenge calls for someone to donate money or get doused, but Steve Fisher says he and his staff are doing both. That ice water probably felt pretty good because it was about 90 degrees on the campus today. Here's a look at the forecast. Beach hazard statement will expire tonight. Coastal temperatures in the upper 70s to low 80s. Moving inland, upper 80s, and we may see some clouds on Saturday and Sunday. Upper 80s in the mountains tomorrow, cooling down just a few degrees over the weekend. And desert temperatures up around 110 degrees. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us and have a great evening.